I know Dr. Oz's reputation precedes him. He's the star of the Emmy Award-winning Dr. Oz show. Was a great athlete and great at academics while he was here at Howard Hill. And he's also a world-famous heart surgeon. But what you might not know is I have had the fortune of knowing Dr. Oz my entire life. He's my uncle, actually. I know some of you know I ask a lot of questions, and this is partially due to Dr. Oz. On our family summer trips, Mehmet's constantly asking us questions regarding Turkish and Roman ruins, and it always fuels my curiosity, and he is a never-ending source of knowledge. And in many ways, he truly embodies our school motto of multi benefacta, many things done well. He's always has boundless knowledge, and he's always sets a great example for our family. Anyway, let's kick it off.
Really become a remarkable orator. His father, my brother-in-law, Big Ben, is over there. And we're all proud alum of this organization. This was Tower Hill High School and middle school, because I attended both. Changed my life in ways that are immeasurable. And I brag frequently about my proud association with this great institution. Ben's older brother, Pierre, was a classmate of mine, actually when their father was governor of the state. And it was like a family reunion whenever we came into school in the morning, because you ran into folks and their families. Most people send all the kids to Tower Hill. And when you're released from what you probably perceive as the purgatory of your years here, you will look back with great fondness on what this institution has offered you. And it came in very subtle ways I did not expect. Subtle things like being able to write well, which is important because as I'm a tenured faculty member, I'm a professor at Columbia University now, and I give the young residents some of the books I got when I was here. Because I know that if you can't write and articulate your thoughts cogently, you're never going to be able to lead a large organization or become tenured faculty or frankly do many of the things you should be able to do because you have plenty of capability to make it happen. It is probably the single biggest thing that differentiates a good education from a bad education. And I'm saying this as a doctor, recognizing that science is what lets me survive and get my patients to survive, but it's subtle things that you learn in school, especially I think done well here, that will allow you to thrive in whatever walk you choose. So I was charged with entertaining a bunch of teens for 45, is it an hour and a half or 2 hours for the time we have together. And I put together a presentation that I think will appeal to you. A little bit of the presentation is going to focus on what you should know when you want to convince other people to do things differently, which will come in handy with your parents, but also your siblings and boyfriends, girlfriends, etc. It'll be handy the rest of your life, frankly, because that's our biggest challenge in life, is getting people we care about to do things differently, whether they help us or help themselves. But I also want to talk a little bit about your own health, because there are themes that I'll touch on that will allow you today to start making decisions to let you live a better life. And I'm going to open it up to questions at the end, if it's okay if we have a little bit of time. So I call this the good life, and the good life is not about fast cars and cash. The good life is about what you really want to do in life. That's what really matters. And on the show, my charge is not to give people information. My charge is to tell people what a field guide would tell them, to allow them to think differently and to discover that amazing ecosystem that's in all of us. And once you realize that the most valuable thing you're ever given from your parents is the temple of your soul, your bodies, it changes the equation a little bit. And I'll come back and touch on that. But to do it right, I've always felt you needed to be jazzy, in people's faces a little bit, quick pitch, and it needs to ideally be sort of a checklist. So I made one for you. This is the regimen. Look at what we're checking off. I'm not hearing audio, guys. I mean, I'm hearing it, but you're not hearing it. But if you need to hear it in the studio. Are you guys hearing that back there? I mean, I can tell it's not the speaker system. Do you hear it well enough in the back? Okay. So these are all the things you should be checking off in your day-to-day lives in order to do the best you can do. And I make these videos, all the different fun things, because this is what I do for a living. I still do heart surgery. I go in on Thursdays. While I'm doing this, if you don't mind, double check, because the audio sound system is not hitting the way it's supposed to. These are mechanical heart pumps, and I put them in there. I can take folks who are dying and are able to keep with these turbines the blood flowing. But when I sit in my office, this is what my office looks like, and yours will one day too, you realize you have precious little time to make some of the big decisions you want to make. And so I started to think about how I can deliver the information that I know to be true, and I'm telling my patients in my office, to everybody. So let's start off some basic stuff, like beauty, right? You look at different images, and you sort of perceive beauty sometimes and not others, right? Everyone thinks the bottom of a baby is pinchable, is beautiful. But many of us think we look like the rear end of an elephant. And when you look at yourself carefully, you realize you're a little bit of both. This is my face divided and then doubled. So this is my left face doubled and my right face doubled. And you notice I'm not very symmetrical. None of us are. We're not supposed to be symmetrical. I've got 4 kids. My oldest daughter, Daphne, hosts The Chew, which is that show on ABC, the cooking show. And when she was a baby, when she was younger, probably your age, and her sisters, she's the oldest, would go to the Natural History Museum with me. And that's the museum that's in, it's that Ben Stiller movie, that is the museum, that's the museum. And they would sit there in the jewel section, and they had all these famous, valuable gemstones in these glass cases. And they looked through there, and they thought they were shopping. They were writing down the ones they were taking home, they thought. And they read them all down. In the middle of this casing was this huge gem that was a jade stone, flawless, not a single blemish. None of them ever picked it. And I always wondered why. And then it suddenly came upon me. It's really not very pretty to see a flawless jade stone. It's not very interesting. What makes it cool was the inlaid gold, the little cracks, the blemishes that actually make it unique, sort of like us. It is what makes us interesting that makes people come to us and talk to us and spend time with us, not being perfect. And yet, nevertheless, many of us see ourselves looking like Jabba the Hutt. And I'm going to share something with you that I hope you take into your future years, because it is the single biggest challenge that you'll be facing, which is something we call work-life balance. I think it's a myth. I don't think there is such a thing, and I'll explain why. Most of your life, you're told to be different and special and the best. That's why you're here. That's why I was here. My father-in-law, every day, same thing, same basic mantra as he drove me to school. I couldn't wait to get out of the car because I could escape the purgatory of more of those conversations. But what he wanted me to be was to be different, which meant I had to actually be separate from everybody else. And I also felt an urge, as you all hopefully do as well, to be intimate, right? To focus on connection, to be with other people and hang out. That's a problem, because if you're going to be different and be the same all at once, right? If you're going to be here and be here at the same time, it's a problem. Because you can't be both at the same time. And when you try to go up this curve to being more ambitious, and you finally get over the edge and look down at intimacy, there's a sharp point there. It's not very much fun to sit on a sharp point. And people don't want to spend much time there for that reason. So I don't think you're ever going to be both at once. You'd impale yourself. What you might be able to do is look over once in a while from one side to the other, whatever your bias happens to be. But there's one exception. When you give, you grow. Think about that. It's paradoxical. If I give you something, why would I feel better and bigger about myself? Yet it somehow tends to be that way. Which is why an important pillar of your education here is that more soulful philanthropic element. But it's not because you want to give stuff away. It's because it actually makes you bigger and better. This woman in the middle, pretty attractive young woman. She's a dancer from Great Britain. She was visiting New York City, first time ever outside of Britain, and she was walking on the sidewalk, and just as she was doing that, and my office is at 30 Rockefeller Center. So it's at 6th Avenue. It's a pretty crowded area, one of the busiest places in the world. And as she was walking there, a cabbie and a bicycle were racing each other and started veering on each other because they were fighting over a lane. So the cabbie goes like this quickly to push the bike off the road. The biker gets off the road, the cabbie loses control, hits the curb, jumps over it, and crushes this woman and amputates her leg right there. Literally, the leg was in a different place than the body. And I was in my office right above this, and one of my medical students looked down and said, he was from Britain, ironically, and he said, why are there cabs driving on the sidewalk here? Why do you do that? It's dangerous. And I ran downstairs with the rest of the team, and we got there, and all these articles say I saved her life. No. The person who saved her life is this guy, the guy in the blue shirt. He's a plumber. He got there first. And you know what he did? He did what plumbers do. He stopped the bleeding. Took his belt off, wrapped it around her leg, and cinched it, and held it until the rest of everybody got there. He saved her life because he stopped her from bleeding to death. And he couldn't deal with it. He couldn't actually ever face her. He couldn't process the fact that this is happening because he had trouble realizing he's got to accept a little too sometimes. Can't always be on the other side. And finally, when they got together on the show, I had them both on the show, it was one of the most emotional moments we ever had, because you finally realize they captured right there in those few minutes what so many of us struggle with, this reality of showing up in each other's lives. Because people don't do that, they struggle. This is data. We run these big surveys on what Americans feel. 57% stressed out. Average life satisfaction is a 6.7 out of 10. It's a D. Who wants to be a D? That's where most of the country is living. Now, why are people stressed out? Why are you stressed out? I'd argue that stress isn't about events around you. Stress is primarily about fear. So you got choices. You can be happy in life, or you can deal with the fears in life. One or the other is going to be dominant in most days of your life. Both will be part of the process. So what holds us back? What prevents us from being who we can be? And I've got in a couple important slides, not many word slides, but a couple of ones that are important. And this is one of them. These are the main reasons people don't change. They don't have time, they don't have money. Or they say they don't have time and money. Usually you make time for things that matter to you, because it's not about time management, it's about energy management. If things give you energy, you'll do more of it. Knowledge is a big problem, that's why I have a show. Because that is an obstacle. People don't know what to eat, or what type of activity to do, how to study, etc. But this last issue, remember I mentioned fear earlier? It's fear of change. That's the bigger driver. And why do you fear change? Because you fear that you'll fail. And if you fail, people won't love you. And that's spiritual death. So let me introduce you to someone you all know. He's a well-known individual, but not a well-respected individual. Lots of problems. Brilliant, though, with an IQ over 150. Memorize whole scripts at once, and yet he keeps getting into trouble. Take a look. It's good, Joe. It's good, but that's just being honest. I would at least, in some part of my soul, if I were you, be thinking, these kids are going to think I know. Can you really hear this back there? I don't mind playing it, but you have to hear them. You're okay hearing them? No. You weren't? I didn't think so. All right. So anyway, what he's basically saying, I'll summarize it. When they fix the audio, you'll get the audio eventually. So what he's saying basically is, I'm messed up, and I didn't realize it until I realized my kids wanted to emulate me, wanted to copy me. And when I realized they wanted to copy me, that became a big problem. Because how do I, as a dad, live one life and say I want you to live a different life? And that tends to be a recurring theme. People change most often when you connect with them emotionally. If you don't, they do this. They do drugs. #1 cause of accidental death in America. And we have a program every year we were doing with the White House, that with a national night of conversation, where we asked every family in America just to spend one night broaching the topic of drugs. Because we've got so many people doing them now. And most of them came out of organized medicine, right? We were handing out all these pills willy-nilly. People think they're safe, they're not. The typical person who's a drug addict is a fully employed 35-year-old construction worker, hurts his back, and next thing you know, he gets 2 weeks of narcotics and he's hooked. And you really can't get off the drugs because it actually makes your pain worse than if you'd never taken it to begin with. Ironically, lots of things work for pain, right? You can take basic Tylenol, Motrin stuff. There are medications designed for chronic pain, but narcotics really don't work very well for long-term pain. And yet we've become a country comfortable in that because we don't deal with the other issues around the pain. And when I look out at the audience, I see this, right? You see people who really haven't really grasped life the way they need to. So let's talk about that. How do you change? Second slide I want you to remember for the rest of the day and hope for your lives. People will not change based on what they know. I wish they would, but they don't. They change based on how they feel. Think about that. I can give you all the facts I want about drugs or frankly anything else. And you're going to say yes, and it's okay, and move on. And if you were going to do drugs anyway, you're probably going to go ahead and do them. And if you were never going to do them, then those bits of information influence you to never do them. But it doesn't really change whether you do them or not. Emotion does. Pictures, stories, narratives. That's why television, what I try to do, is mostly about telling stories about things I believe to be true. So when you want to change the lives of people, or even your own life, you got to do the same thing. That's why the Bible is written in stories. It works much better than if it's just a list of things to do. If the 10 Commandments were enough by themselves, you'd be golden, right? And every spiritual tradition seems to recognize this. They all have their rules, right? The playing field, you know, you got to know how to, where to hit the ball. But the actual game is on the field. And you can't make rules about that as easily. You got to let that story play out. Second big issue, got to make it easy to do the right thing. If you got a bad habit, you want to make it into a good habit, you can't just get rid of the bad habit. You got to replace it with a good habit, and it has to be an easy habit to follow, or you won't do it the rest of your life. So who cares if you adopt it for a week or 10 days? You got to adopt it for long enough that you really know you need to be part of it. That's why I have never told people to eat healthy food, ever. I tell them to eat food they love that happens to be healthy. That works. And finally, if you adore your solutions and you share them, you get people to live the good life. So I'm going to give you an exercise that I want you to do later today. You're going to approach 3 of your friends here in school. You can approach your family if you want to, but your friends live better. And they have to be your friends. That's unfortunately part of the game. You'll see why. And you're going to ask those 3 people what it is about you they like. And they only have one word to describe you. One word. And whatever that word is whatever reason, what you send off to people around you. And that's probably the word that you want to be able to live up to day in and day out. The word for me was passion. I did this the last day. Before I started my show 8 years ago, I did the Oprah show. She's my partner on our show, and I probably did 80 shows with her. It's the last exercise she ever gave me, and maybe the most valuable. Because I know every day when I get up, or when I go on the show, or when I go to the hospital, whatever I'm doing, I need to be that person. I might be other things too, but that's not why people really care about what I have to say. They care because I'm passionate about it. You all have a different word, so figure out what it is, text them as soon as the school's out, and find that, and then remember those words as you go through life. Now, I've taken multiple approaches to telling stories, and I've realized along the way that you need to, for some people, distract them to get them to pay attention. So here's a video. I do the Today Show. I do it to Today Show partners of ours on testicular cancer, which is the most common cancer in young men your age. Take a look.
It can be pretty hard to get a man's attention, but this is about men's health, which is a pretty big deal. So you've taken the liberty of incorporating some guy stuff in this video to keep you interested. Here's 3 easy steps to check yourself for testicular cancer at home. First, go in the shower, because the steam will relax your scrotum. Next, hold each testicle in your hand, one at a time, between your fingers and your thumbs. Look for hard bumps. Smooth or rounded bumps on one side, but not the other. If you found any of those, or notice a change in size, see your doctor. Now you know how to get your health into your own hands. Literally.
You like that? You want to get the young men, that's what you have to do. This is good for the teachers to know too. Just every few seconds distract them. They'll come back. So here are the 5 big life adjustments I always tell your parents about. They apply to you too, just not quite yet. But they're important because all these are the factors that drive most of how you age. Imagine that. How can 5 things influence how long and how well you'll live? Because you'll come back here in 35 years, like I did, for my reunion, which sounds like forever for you, but I thought the same thing when I was in your seats. And you'll notice that people don't look the same as they did here, most of the time. Sometimes they do. And you're going to be curious about what it is that some people did. Look around your classmates there. I'm telling you it's going to happen. And some of them are going to do so well with how they take care of their bodies, and others aren't. And you'll see the differences. They'll start in 15, 20 years, but certainly by the time you're my age, my calcified neurons, you'll definitely feel the difference. And so these 5 factors become influential. So things like blood pressure, which is the #1 cause of aging of all, because it rips your arteries apart. Exercise, a diet that you love that's good for you. Stress issues, sleep is the #1 most underappreciated problem. So you should keep that in mind. And of course, the addiction issues that I touched on earlier. Now, how many of you know Bob Harper from The Biggest Loser? You heard that name? Good. So Bob came on my show. He had a heart attack, believe it or not. 50-year-old healthy guy. That's the big blood vessel in front of the heart, and that's the vessel in the middle that has plaque in it sometimes. If that plaque starts to get tighter, it begins to get raw and then angry, and then it ruptures. And when it ruptures, it's like a scab in your body. Your body wants to form a clot on that scab. And when it does that, it creates a big problem for you. Because now all of a sudden, you got a big bruise, boom, right there, in the front of your heart. That's what a heart attack looks like. You just saw it right there. And it happens pretty quickly. And it happened to him, and thankfully he was at a gym exercising, and there was a doctor running next to him on the treadmill. Pulled out, saved him. And it allowed him to survive when he shouldn't have. And when he came on the show, he was very emotional because people who are his age, clinics around the country. I'm going to show you a video of a young man who discovered something about himself at a big free clinic that we were doing.
We tested all kinds of people. Are you ready? I am. From all different places, Pennsylvania, California, North Carolina, and all walks of life. Come on up.
How about Green? You're having your test done today, so I'm supposed to have it done for a while because I drink a lot of water. I'm always thirsty. Can never cure the thirst.
37-year-old Jared had never been tested for diabetes before.
Is that Jared?
Hey, Jared, how are you? You know when they call the doctor over, that's not good news. Well, that runs. I'm going to tell you that number's supposed to be under 6. The amount of sugar that's traveling around in your blood cells needs to be under that number. That's what it should be for all of us. Your number is 12.8. Wow. 12.8 worries me a lot. That's more than twice what's tolerable.
What do I do about it? Most important thing you could have said. So Jared's peeing all the time, always tired, always thirsty. What's the diagnosis? Diabetes, right? He sort of probably knew that was going to come down at him. Didn't want to face it. Interestingly, when I took him to the emergency room after the show, his blood sugar was over 500. 500. Now, with diet alone, he fixed that problem. But it's pretty stunning that he got to that position in the beginning and he could reverse it on his own, which is probably the biggest idea I can leave you with, because we're all hearing about the healthcare debate in Congress, right? You all following that? And it's sort of a head fake, because it's not really dealing with our problem. The real problem in America is it takes twice as much to take care of any of you as if you lived in Europe or another part of the world that was developed. So we can't ever make the budgets work if we're going to spend that much money on healthcare. The things that we need to appreciate are battles that we need to wage in our homes, in our communities. It's the societal drivers of illness that make it so expensive to take care of. If you fight the battle in your home, right, in your kitchen, your living room, your bedroom, then you're going to get healthy. If you don't, you're going to end up in the emergency room, and then again and again in the emergency room until someone finally tells you got diabetes, like Jared heard. Now, how do you drive that at home? Well, this is one of the ways I do it. Look at how beautiful this lung is. Pristine pink, not a flaw in it. Right? It looks beautiful, right? Majestic. It's like a sponge. You can absorb oxygen. A smoker's lung looks like this. Notice the tar deposition there? You see at the very top, where it looks a little moth-eaten? That's called emphysema. So when you talk to a cigarette smoker, you can either say, smoking's bad for you, you're going to die. And then what do? They say, geez, I want to stop. I know it's bad for me, but I can't. I tried, I failed. And so to relax, they go outside and smoke. Right? And most importantly, smokers always tell me that they have 20 friends in that little carton of cigarettes. 20 people they can talk to, basically, when they smoke. So what am I giving them back for that? So if I don't show them this kind of imagery that's difficult to process, but once you get there, you can't look away, it's visually arresting, it begins to change the internal dialogue. Because the real question you want to ask yourself is, if you're doing, but in this case, if you're smoking, if a friend of yours, someone you love dearly, was smoking a cigarette, what would you tell them? If someone you cared about was eating food they shouldn't eat, what would you tell them? That's what you tell yourself. Because that's how you should feel about yourself. Interestingly, cigarette smokers will stop once they get that emotional hook that I showed you earlier with Charlie Sheen. So here's the famous woman who at age 18 had 2 kids, no job, and no money, and built an empire. See how she deals with the problems that she was having with her cigarettes as I confront her on the stage.
What is your worst habit?
I'm so embarrassed and ashamed. Potatoes and cigarettes.
You smoke?
I just kind of hold them. They actually do the smoking.
Well, how long have you been holding them for?
50 years.
50 years? And how many do you hold today?
As many as I can. Probably hold the back of the eyes. Don't look at me that way.
So what you hear in her voice, you heard shame, embarrassment. right? And that's not the emotions that work well to get people to change their lives better. She's done so many things right. The one thing that was left, the thing that was holding her up, was something that she was struggling with. So how do I drive this point home? I can do it a couple ways. But I thought I'd start off with the idea that probably is perplexing the most Americans, which is weight. You know, if we look like this, if the master sculpted this, we wouldn't be, celebrating these pieces quite as nicely. And let me give you a couple insights about weight. It might come in handy for yourselves or certainly your families. First of all, it's not about your weight. It's about your waist. It always has been. Waist size is a better predictor of illness. And interestingly, when you look at your height divided by 2, that's the most your waist should ever be. Now, I like that number because it's accurate for men and for women, and it's accurate for young people too. And we never want to tell young women that they want to lose weight because it creates all kind of eating disorders. But waist size is a way of assessing how dresses fit, pants fit, etc. So it tends to work a little better. Now the question is, why is it the waist is more important? Because you know what, you got big thighs. Who cares? There's no health issue there. You may not like it, but it's personal preference. Whereas if you got a big belly, it becomes a life and death issue. This is the Omenta, yellow pad in front of there. I'll move it for a second. You guys have all had breakfast, right? The breakfast moved through your stomach. And that liver is the brown thing up there. Your gallbladder is the green thing. And that food now is making its way through your small intestine. Now, within 2 hours or so, it's pretty much where it needs to be to get digested. Then the bile, the green stuff from the gallbladder, comes in, washes it, and begins to break it down so particles of nutrients can get through the wall of the intestine and start to move through this big vein called the portal vein. That blue thing there, the door vein, into the liver. Now, the liver does one of 2 things. If you gave food to it that's good for you, then you're going to do great. And it's going to make those proteins and other nutrients you need. If you eat bad food, you turn your liver into foie gras, the fat, which afflicts 1 in 4 Americans now. And then that pad, that yellow pad, as if it begins to stretch ponderously across your waist, it causes more and more issues. Now, the question is, what are you going to do about this? Well, in order to make sure that belly fat, that omentum, doesn't get too big so that it doesn't poison your liver and cause all problems with cholesterol, blood pressure, and diabetes, you need to get in there and measure it. So I want you to go home today and get a measuring tape and put it over your parents' hips and around their belly button. Don't tell them what you're doing. Just measure their waist. And here's a little tactic. Guys, including your teachers, over the age of 40, they never buy a new belt size. They just slip it down like this. And walk around. Did you get the end of a pigeon toe like this, right? Or the penguin toe? And they walk around like there's a 28-inch belt, right? But that's nothing to do with their waist. You got to actually measure the waist like this picture shows you. So I try to tell these stories in different ways. So here's a video we made with the Ad Council about the conversation people sometimes try to have with their doctors. And you might find it enjoyable. It has a little bit to do with something that a lot of us love to eat.
Well, Thomas, you've got pre-diabetes. But with more exercise and a change in diet, it can be reversed. I've tried exercising. It just makes me hungry for bacon. I love bacon too. And who really likes to exercise?
Not me.
Me neither.
Nobody.
So we're good? What? Oh, you still have pre-diabetes. Big time.
So, I'm going to skip that one just for time. So conventional diets don't work. Why don't diets work? Because there's a dozen systems, literally a dozen systems that make you eat. How many of you can hold your breath indefinitely underwater? In the back there somewhere. No, you can't do it, right? You can't do it. You don't even think about doing it because you know there's systems in your body that are going to make you breathe. You have just as many, more even, that force you to eat food because there was never a benefit to going on a diet. You burn all the calories off hunting. Well, today they go hunting inside the milk carton out of the way. So it's a little different amount of energy consumption and burning, so you can't ingest quite as much. So what works? Spicy foods work. You can give this to your siblings if you want. They cut down actually the amount of calories eaten and speed your metabolism. Nuts are my favorite. I know sometimes schools have issues with nut allergies in kids, but if you can eat nuts, they are the single best way to keep your body in the best shape it can be in. You won't get fat on them. It's quite the opposite. People think you get fat with nuts. You lose weight with nuts because there's so many nutrients, and your brain's looking for nutrients that you actually are satisfying it immediately. Plus, you can always put nuts in your pockets, in your backpack. You always got them around, so you don't have to go foraging, right, like a gerbil through the vending machine looking for foods, right? Everyone's searching their pockets now, right? And then there's this, yes, colas. And you all know colas are a problem. But they're specifically a problem because you don't appreciate how much sugar you're consuming. There's roughly a teaspoon of sugar per ounce. And so you will eat an extra 125 calories at the meal you have a soft drink with than you would have had, plus the extra 160 calories from the drink. You can't cope with that many extra calories. Your body just can't process it, and there's no nutrients there. Remember I said nuts are great because when you eat nutrients, your body stops eating, stops burning calories. When you have only calories but no nutrients, your body says, cut back in there. Go on. Get those calories you promised you were going to get me. Now, the challenge with diet sodas is they don't seem to work. Diet sodas don't really impact you because they're so sweet, your tongue tastes them, and yet your brain knows you didn't get any calories. So it says, what gives here, guy? And it forces you to go get more food. In fact, you tend to eat more sugary foods afterwards. So it's not the free lunch we thought it was. So how do you get people, if you get the mic back again, how do you get people, it works. How do you get people to eat less sugar? Well, this is one way.
Sugar addict. Isn't everyone? It's not like you're eating that much sugar, right? Wrong. Let's break it down. The average American consumes 142 pounds of sugar a year. That's right, pounds. That's 1,463 bottles of soda. Not a soda fanatic? We're trying 5,855 cookies. That's 16 cookies a day. Who needs 16 cookies a day? Or for that matter, 1,894 cups of chocolate ice cream. Think of it this way. You're eating the equivalent of Bruno Mars. Bruno Mars made of sugar. You know that can't be good for you. So how do you stop craving so much sugar? I've got a plan. And oh yeah, it takes just 14 days. So let's get started.
So, it's a lot of sugar. Bruno Mars weighs about 160 pounds, roughly. And that's what we're getting in our bodies every single year on average. And one of the problems with that is it poisons the gut. The gut microbiome, which is the single biggest advance that will happen in your lifetimes, at least your younger lifetimes, and understanding what this is, there are 10 times more cells or bacteria in your gut than cells in your body. And these bacteria need to be fed very meticulously. It's about the size of a tennis court, literally, of cell coverage that your body tends to take for granted. You do too. You actually outsource digestion to the gut. So what do? Well, you start to suffer. You get leaky gut, you don't function well in school, your body gets swollen, you get autoimmune problems, allergies that you didn't think you'd ever be prone to, and you get problems as well like obesity and diabetes. Lots of problems you don't want to deal with. Even those nut allergies that so many kids are having, we believe are linked to some of the issues we have with our gut flora. And if you don't feed the lower gut with the foods that we know naturally allow bacteria to thrive, and there's resistant starch as an example, bananas and beans, soluble fiber, which are like root vegetables, and insoluble fiber, which are the whole grains, which don't get broken down much, but they bulk up your poop. You want that stuff working, right? You want those things probing along. And if you don't manage that, you end up paying the price long term. So I encourage you to think very carefully about the power of the food you're putting in your body. It can be as important as anything else you may do in allowing you to remember things in a class, thrive in an athletic field, sing a higher note, or be the person that you want to be. Now, in addition to food, there's physical activity. And your body is designed to have a fair amount of muscle. Interestingly, you lose a lot more calories with muscle than fat. That's designed to store calories, not burn them. Muscles deserve to use energy up, obviously. And you'll notice in the next couple of years, the big muscles that you have will begin to shrink a little bit if you don't take care of it. You're designed to sort of hardwired to build muscle till you're about 20. And then you'll start to slip down. Now, here's the thing. If you can protect that muscle, it doesn't take much to do it, you can be as lean as the animals are when you go out on a photographic safari. Now look at this. This is a cheetah. There's not an ounce of fat on this thing. None. Look at the prey. There's no fat on the prey at all. Now watch when it closes the gap. And then think, could I do that too? Could I go full speed? Yeah, you can. You absolutely can go full speed. And here's the beauty of that. What I just showed you is really interval training. How many have heard of interval training? Put your hands up. All right. So if 1 out of 10 minutes you go really hard, which you do in most sports naturally, then you'll be able to, for the time you're not exercising hard and the rest of the day, still have a higher metabolic rate and you'll build more muscle as you do that. Not bulky muscle, but the kind of lean muscle you want to be a good athlete. But you need to keep doing that for the rest of your life. And it doesn't take a lot of time. People think you need hours and hours. We're talking about 10 minutes of intense activity a day. You can break it up and do it any way you want to do it. But that little bit of activity breaks stuff. Now here's what we've done in America. We've automated the opposite. Can you imagine putting an escalator to a gym? right? I mean, we do this. We make it easy. So here's what I do in the set, and I challenge you to do this as well. It's called the squat sit. This is Homo sapien position number 1. The fundamental position we used to always have. If you go to rural parts of the world, this is how they sit. And I'm from Turkey originally, and my family, and they sit like this around the coffee cups. They're comfortable. This stretches out your back, your hips, your hamstrings, your knees, your feet, your ankles, everything at once. And it was a natural position that many people have trouble sitting into. For those of you who are constipated, I'm not going to have you put your hands up. Or at least talk to your friends next to you who are constipated. If you sit like this, that's how people always went to the bathroom. It's much more comfortable. It actually opens up the sphincters down below. It allows, because otherwise it's like a big S. That's why I always joke it needs to be S-shaped, the poop. You all know that, right? Do you know that or not? All right, when you go to the bathroom, you need to at least audit what's coming out of your body, right? You would look at a car guzzling stuff, the black smoke coming out the back, you know about it. So your urine needs to be clear. That's how you know you've drunk enough fluids. So forget about 8 glasses a day. That was all made up based on World War II experiments with GIs. And it's really not accurate because you can eat a lot of food that has mostly water like potatoes and can make the difference up. So your urine needs to be clear. That's how you know you're getting enough fluid intake content. You should be able to don't literally do this, but you could literally read through it if you needed to. And your poop needs to be S-shaped. And it needs to be S-shaped because that's a cast of your rectum. So when it comes out, if it's like a little bombardier, right, that's not good because it's not supposed to be a try. And when it hits the water, it should slide in like a Greg Louganis dive, right? An Olympic dive. Just slip into the water. And then it should basically be like a half-submerged submarine because you have a little bit of fat in there, a little bit, so fat floats, so it rides it up. But there should be not all fat, so a little bit's down. That, now you know. You don't have to acknowledge it, but I know you all look. What time is this period over? We got time? All right. Real quick, sleep. I never paid attention to sleep when I was in your shoes. Most of you don't either. It comes naturally, but for some of you it doesn't. And it's a real issue. And through your lives, you will notice problems with your sleep. It tends to become more of an issue. Without sleep, you don't get growth hormone. Without growth hormone, you don't keep growing, which is why it's so important. But sleep is also deadly. Because when you don't sleep, it causes all kinds of medical problems. Cancer, high blood pressure, obesity. If you're going to lose weight, the best way to do it is to sleep more. First, you can't eat while you're sleeping. But also, your brain craves 4 things. Sex, sleep, water, and food. And so if you don't sleep, right, then you've got to actually eat more to make up the difference. That's why people who are tired eat carbohydrates. Shift workers eat more and get heavier faster and actually die earlier because we believe of that. But here's what happens as well. You all know about alcohol causing car accidents. What people don't know is 21% of all fatalities on the roads are caused by sleepy drivers. Here's a guy driving along, minding his own business, and watch his eyes as he gets drowsy, right? And then this is ironically caught by his camera in his car. There he's asleep now. Now watch what happens. Bounces back, left, right. Now he goes off the cliff. Good. Now he's lucky he survived. But this is the kind of story we're hearing more and more about. So we're doing all kinds of stuff. You don't want that. How do you sleep better? Be careful of light. Bright light wakes you up. I light an iPad or iPhone. Smart device will shut down the ability of the brain to make melatonin. Without that, you can't sleep. Loose pajamas, critical. Reduce ambient noise, because it does matter. If melatonin works, especially if you're traveling from time zone to time zone, tart cherries naturally have it. And it's not a bad way of getting it if you want it. And you got to address the anger and hostility that are going on in your life. Let me just define this for a second, because you'll be struggling with this. I've never really talked to folks about getting rid of anger, because anger is something that motivates us to get stuff done. And what's the worst thing to tell someone who's angry? Calm down, right? Anger calls for action. You're not supposed to calm down. But there's a difference between anger and hostility. So driving down here from New York, there was a person weaving in front of us, right? And I was angry at them because they're blocking my way and I was trying to get down here, right? But I didn't wish he would die, right? That's hostility. When you don't feel like your little raindrop falling into the ocean of humanity, that becomes a problem. And you should feel that amount of connection and intimacy. That very first curve I showed you about life-work balance, you need to feel that. Otherwise, nothing else is worth doing anyway. And so you can do lots of things that this works, short term. But we actually have tools now. On phones, we have an app now that allows you to measure the amount of stress in your voice, which can actually help you figure out how people perceive what you're saying to them. Because it's not always the words you're using, right? It's the tone that conveys. No, bottle of wine. You guys can't drink the wine anyway. Give it to your parents. Take the cork. You put the cork between the upper and lower tooth, between your mandible and your maxillary area. And that actually relaxes the TMJ joint, the temporomandibular joint, and this big muscle in your cheeks called the masseter muscle. That muscle is incredibly powerful. This joint is the only one that purposely disarticulates, goes out of joint every time you chew so you can generate force. So you want to relax that joint. You can touch your toes too. You take any of the big muscles that are tensed up all the time and relax them. This happens to work pretty well for me. You can put it in your car, and the best part is, for those of you who can drive, when people go past you, they don't bother you. You have a cork stop. So let me leave you with two last thoughts, and I want to take some questions from you. First up, we all make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. I've told my 4 kids, I have one in high school, Oliver still, and I tell them the same thing. Make your mistakes now. But they need to be mistakes you can recover from. So take chances in doing things that you may not be able to do when you get older because you're not going to have the time, flexibility, ingenuity, or anything else. But I do emphasize there's some mistakes you don't want to make. The major problem with the human brain is it takes so darn long to develop. And in some people, it takes a long, long time. But on average, the human brain, the prefrontal cortex, the part that's your executive decision-making part, doesn't really mature until you're in your early 20s. Now, that doesn't mean you can't make decisions. It means that you're prone to making some decisions that can really hurt you when you get older. And the best example I can give you is with addiction. Because the people who get addicted to stuff before age 20 have a much, much more difficult time kicking the habit as those who get addicted after age 20. It's still a headache after 20, but much, much easier. Cigarette smoking is probably the best studied example. Because you no longer have the iconic, you gain the confidence that you didn't have to smoke in order to be able to live your life well. It's actually the biggest challenge with pot, because medicinal marijuana is really, really powerful and really works. And when I was sitting in your seats, we couldn't even talk about marijuana. But I've seen it firsthand. I understand the benefits of it. The only challenge is when people start smoking pot before 20, they think they need to smoke pot in order to deal with life. That is a very powerful addiction. And you match that with the iconic motions, all the gestures, that's done on purpose. If you look at advertisements for cigarettes, for example, they will purposely drive those subconscious elements. On Formula One racing, they get advertised cars, they put the cigarette-looking items in the front of the cars. So it's shaking. It makes it look like you're pushing a pack of cigarettes towards the viewer. And they make the cars the bright red, iconic Marlboro red, so that it reminds you of that. It's not done by accident. Very thoughtfully done, and for very nefarious reasons, but it does work. And it's one of the reasons that we always tell folks, make mistakes, just make ones that you can get back on track quickly from, because it's all about the marathon of life, not the wind sprint. And if you're going to do things for the rest of your life, you have to automate them. And I suggest right now, wherever you are in your lives, you find 1 or 2 things that you love so much, that work so well for you, you don't want to change them. Maybe it's breakfast. Right? I have the same breakfast most every morning. It's Greek yogurt with some berries. I like it. It tastes great, easy to cart around. I make it before I leave in the morning usually. Automate it. It's always there. I don't think about it. Save your energy-making chi for later in the day. They did an interesting study in Israel. They looked at judges who had to grant paroles to convicts. So in case any of you go to jail, you should remember this. When they went for parole hearings in the morning, the judges gave up many more paroles than when they did it in the afternoon. Why? Why would that be? They have the exact same backgrounds, the same judges, different convicts, but same stories. It should have been random. What they learned is that if you're tired and you don't want to make a decision, as a parole judge, the safer way to go is to not grant parole, and no one will blame you. So they did. You'll find it to be true in your life. If you're going to go ask a teacher for a favor, do it in the morning. If you're going to see a doctor, see him in the morning. Because that's when they haven't burned through their energy-making chi yet. Their decision-making energy is still intact. And if you don't have the energy, you start to do other things. For example, people eat a lot differently in late afternoon because they get tired, they get exhausted. I always cart around dark chocolate in my bag because I want to be able to take, that's a great way of getting some caffeine without much sugar. And you don't eat too much of it because it's 80% dark chocolate, so it's a little bitter. But you should find your own hacks. But the best hack is don't waste time making energy, wasting decisions, that you can avoid in the morning. Because that way you have more to go on. And ultimately, you got to give your heart a reason to keep beating. And that's probably the most important reason I came down here, because I treasure, and I'll speak to my teachers that taught me here still today, because I value their interaction so much. And you will, I believe, and I hope, treasure the exact same things I did as you walk away from these hollow halls. So if I can take 1 or 2 questions, is that okay? Looking to Ben, although he doesn't teach here. It's okay? All right, so put your hands up, yell loudly. You can ask personal questions about the person next to you. Issues in your own life. Someone's going to have to go first. I'll call it somebody otherwise. So I'm looking in the back. Yes, go ahead. Yell it out if you don't mind. No, it's behind you. Oh, yeah. And there's a lady in the back afterwards. That'll woke you up. I think we may have blown our sound system out.
Would you make an assessment on the comparison of Gatorade to sodas, and how much Gatorade are you to drink, and how much sugar is in that?
So Gatorade was developed at the University of Florida, because they're the Gators. And it had just come out actually when I was in school, when we were playing. So I played, I remember when I played sports here, we just got regular old water to drink. But I played in the blue gold game after my senior year. So it's a football game. And they had this Gatorade that they spiked with salt. And we were training down at the University of Delaware, and it was so hot, and you were sweating so much, if you didn't literally drink the salt, they could have put a salt lick there. The horse, chunk licked at it. So I understand why they wanted to make Gatorade in Florida. So 2 caveats. If you're exercising to that capacity, you can pretty much drink whatever you want, you'll be fine. Very few people exercise like that continually. Most folks actually crazily imbibe more calories, drink more calories than they burn in their activity. Which is why I'm so hesitant to recommend Gatorade and other products like it. They've increased the amount of sugar they add to be competitive oftentimes. So if you're going to drink a sports drink, a Gatorade style drink, look on the label, make sure that you've got a reasonable number of sugar calories. I don't worry that much about the salt at your age, if you're burning a lot of, if you're sweating quite a bit. But generally speaking, water is all you need. And you can take as additional solid stuff, anything you want afterwards. If you're doing more than 3 hours of activity, those drinks tend to make more sense. Soft drinks, we don't allow them in my house. The kids can have them for celebrations, but we would never make it easy for my kids to get soda. And if you have soda in your home, I would hide it. So you can get it if you really need it. But, in fact, go to your fridge today and do some engineering of the fridge. I never understood why you hide the healthiest foods in the crisper. You never see them, right? And the leftovers and junk and whatever you got left, you put it right at eye level as you open the fridge. You ever wonder that? So go home and give your parents a hard time about that. There's a question here. Yeah, the area one about it. Go ahead, sir.
What's your opinion on placebos and the rolling out medicine?
So the placebo effect is just dramatic. It's probably 1/3 of all the benefits we see in clinical trials. There's something called the nocebo effect as well. Nocebo means I told you you're not going to do well, and you don't do well. They're both pretty powerful. The power of suggestion has always been influential, especially in psychology, which is why it's so hard to study psychiatric endeavors. But in more traditional medicine, it still exists. We do placebo operations on people, and they'll still say they had a benefit. They did one recently looking at knee pain, which is pretty common in people in their 30s and 40s. And in one group, they did the scope. The other group, they faked doing the scope. And they had similar results. Because obviously the perceived benefit was mostly in their heads. So we have to always control it. But I must say, in my day-to-day life, it's not a bad thing to use as an asset. So when I talk to patients about procedures, I can describe it as a glass half full or half empty. And I think you're better off describing it half full, because people come along for the ride then. And they have the confidence that they can show up. As I was told when I was sitting in one of your chairs, whether you think you can or can't, you're going to be right. So, wish for the right things. Yes, ma'am.
What are the best ways to deal with stress?
Best ways to deal with stress. Interestingly, number one by far in every trial I've ever seen is physical activity. And part of it is because your body was naturally designed to be active. And when you're active, you have trouble, using all your brain power to coordinate your body. And so you don't have as much to ruminate over what's going on. Most stress is through catastrophizing. You're making things that are out there but not that big a deal worse than they are. It's especially true when you're young. That's why they have these fun little exercises where they say, okay, do this, you want to do this as well. While you're asking your friends what they think of you, write down the things that worry you the most and put it in your desk drawer. And don't look at it for another week. And then look at it in a week. You'll laugh. The things that take up your time, that you waste mental chi on, are usually itty-bitty trivial things that are much bigger in your mind than, like my wife, who's married to Ben's wife. She'll I'll get home at night and she's all worked up on something. There are 6 kids in that family. And they're all, so I'll get home, she's all worked up, and I'll say, what's going on? I emailed someone, they didn't answer. Really? I mean, did they get the text? Or, how do you know what's really going on? You have no idea, but like most people, I am guilty of this just in different ways. You tell yourself a story that's much worse than what's really happening. Think about that, right? You text someone, they don't answer you. Right? They must hate you. I mean, why else would they not answer you? Right? I mean, they must have gotten it. They certainly saw it. They probably didn't forget about it. They must hate you. And so, off you go. The other thing that I found very helpful for stress that I do daily is meditation. And you can do different kinds of meditation. And I do my best meditation after I do physical activity. So if I do yoga or work out or play sports or whatever, I just can sort of relax there for a few minutes. But if I don't do any activity, I still meditate. I close my eyes. I do transcendental meditation, but you can do whatever kind, mindfulness meditation. Find a path. In fact, I tell the audience at home, just go to the bathroom. Put the lid down. You're not really going to the bathroom. You're just going to sit there quietly. People won't bother you in the bathroom. Just spend 5 minutes with yourself. We, historically, as a species, always had that. And there's some unique things about humans that made us able to do what we've done. But the ability to spend time with ourselves was an important part of that. Everyone praises the fact that our species left Africa 70,000 years ago and somehow managed to spread across Eurasia and ultimately to this continent. But the other question you should ask yourself is why were we there for 2.5 billion years before leaving? I mean, that's a lot of time hanging out in Ethiopia, right? You would have thought a couple of folks have been chased out or run away or got curious. Something held us back. And what I think allowed us to leave is that we began to have joint beliefs. Beliefs about things we couldn't see. That's what religions are. That's what belief in capitalism is. That's what a belief that there are other things beyond you. Again, you can't touch or feel or prove, but you still believe them to be true. Those are your values that go beyond yourself. When our species could have a belief that was bigger than us, then we could bond together in bigger units. Normally, if you study humans, we can only really get into groups of a couple dozen. Because once you get bigger than that, you have trouble just figuring out who everybody is. That's sort of a family unit, right? 3 dozen, 4 dozen people max. When you get past that, you don't remember specifics and details enough to be able to really make them part of your team. But if you have beliefs that are bigger than that, you can put together 10 different families into 500 people, and then 5,000, then 5 million. And then our species went out and we did some pretty bad stuff, right? We knocked off the Neanderthals. Homo erectus, remember those guys? They got killed off about 30,000 years ago. So there were 7 humanoid species, and we took over the planet. But it was primarily because we had the ability to believe. That same ability to believe causes stress in us. Because we can also believe things that are not true. So it comes with the bad. Okay, one last question. Yes, go ahead, ma'am, you go. All right, 2 more.
So, what stayed the same in, healthy living over generations and, cultures?
What's going to sustain?
What stayed the same over, healthy living? What's the one way of healthy living that stays the same?
Excellent question about healthy living and what it is that we have found looking over time. So what I'm fascinated by is alternative approaches to healing, because oftentimes they're based on years of experience, not theory. And so if you look at Ayurvedic traditions, which are from India, traditional Chinese medicine, there's Central African healing traditions. In Mongolia, they had music they used a lot. South America had their traditions. Everyone had their own little deal going on. And we've learned a lot about what works and what doesn't work. But I'll share the best experience of all, which are the blue zones. Who knows what the blue zones are? Oh, good. Not many. One person. So, if you had a... Sorry?
So those are small areas where people lived over 100.
That's exactly right. Nice. What's your name?
David?
David. Ben, be like David. So, this is... If you go to the blue zones, these are places... So ethnographers would draw circles around populations based on how long they lived. And they saved the blue pens for the longest lived groups. So this guy from Sicily described a group of people in Sicily that didn't seem to ever die. And he went and presented this to the conferences of ethnographers, and he got ridiculed. I mean, really, just roasted him, because he was obviously a liar, because it was impossible. And he said, well, if I'm a liar, then why don't you guys come and interrogate what I've done? And they did that, and it turned out he was telling the truth. He had discovered an area where people just never die into their, 110, 120 comfortably. And what made it different? So again, in blue zones, and that's not just Sardinia, it's Okinawa, Costa Rica, Loma Linda in this country. These people live to age 100 4 times more commonly than if you lived in Wilmington, Delaware, where you and I grew up. So what's different? The answer to the question about what works. Daily rigorous activity. They don't go work out. They pick up the bucket. They climb to the top of the mountain. They fill the bucket up. They climb down again, right? And they dump the water on their crops or feed their farm animals or whatever. So daily rigorous activity. They don't get babied. I never helped my parents. My dad's 91. Never helped him do anything. I don't want to, because I love him. Because if I take his luggage for him and carry all the stuff, he'll get frail. I want him to work. I want him going up the stairs. I didn't put stuff in the house that would make it easy for him to do nothing, because that's the recipe for death. In fact, frailty is the #1 cause of death in America. If I get rid of all the cancer in America, got rid of all of it, we'd live 2.8 years longer. That's it. 2.8 years. What kills us is not the cancer, is we can't get treated for the cancer because we're too weak. So daily rigorous activity, whole foods that come out of the ground, looking the way they look when you eat them. Real stuff. If there's no label on it, it's always better for you. So it sounds simple, lean greens or vegetables, you can have some fruits, but basically that's what they have to eat because they didn't have the opportunity of everything else. Third, alcohol in very small amounts, like a glass a day. And that seems to work because it makes people come together and sit and celebrate. It wasn't about having a beer for breakfast. It was about, sitting with family or friends around the table and talking, because that social network becomes really important. And interestingly, belief. And the beliefs can be very different. There's no specific religion, but a philosophy that allows you and the community to be pulled together periodically, which is one of the reasons it's such an important pillar for society. And we should think twice before we undermine the power of these habits, these tools, these cultural norms, because they do tend to pull us together. That's why when you see all the debate that's happening now in America, you have to be thoughtful, because our founding fathers never thought we were all the same. They said we're equal, right? All men are created equal. And that's an important distinction, because we were thought of as being many different tribes. But the tribes have to respect each other. That was mandatory, because we were all equal. I couldn't beat up your tribe, you couldn't beat up my tribe. We all had to be fair to each other, but we could be very defensively different in what we thought was right for ourselves. And that's what's allowed our species to thrive. And I do believe we'll get back to that as people more and more realize that we cause more harm than good when we pull away the ability for us to be unique in our groups.